You're good, sir. All right. All right, we will begin. When you have your papers out, look for page 82, please. And we'll start where it says confirmation. But before that, they don't have any papers, and I'm out. Oh, never mind. No, that's okay. That's okay. They're fine, I say. That's fine. Yes, ma'am.
Are we in question?
Yes, I was just coming to that.
I'm sorry.
My goodness.
Well, you're taking the papers out.
Real eager. Man, I'm telling you. She asked if we were, I was gonna ask her any questions. Oh. Like she would be ignored or something. That happens to Betsy. Harry, you're next, okay? But you have to wait for her because she really jumped the gun.
Harry should ask his question first.
No, that's okay, Kathy. Go ahead. Ask your question.
Last Sunday was Whit Sunday.
Last Sunday was Whit Sunday, also known as Pentecost Sunday.
You put a nice little description that Whit Sunday came from.
Commentary on CRT from the biblical.
Yes, critical race theory, yes.
That was very good.
Well, thank you.
I really appreciate that.
Thank you. I read probably 20 articles, and that was the best one, I think, that kind of summed things up real nice and used some good biblical points. It wasn't perfect, but then again, I didn't want to take the time just to write one page on it, so it'll do for now. Well, yeah, I hope you do. I hope all of you, whether you're interested at first or not, when you look at the newsletter and the comment I made about critical race theory, and you say, I don't care about that. It would be good for you to read it again. Yes, it would. It really would be good for you to read it, and if you come across a paragraph or a sentence or two that you don't understand, you don't know what they're talking about, please feel free to write or call me or bring it to class here or whatever. I think really this is very important because this is becoming. I mean, we complain a lot about political correctness here in our group. We complain a lot about the woke, the W-O-K-E, woke society, which just simply means that you care more than anybody else, or you care as much as you're supposed to, or more maybe, about some injustice that is being done or has been done, and so on and so forth. This is the main philosophy of our society here in the United States, going on from here on for who knows the next 30, 40 years. I don't know. It's always impossible to guess what's next. You can never figure out what's next. Only the thing is it's probably worse. That much you probably know. But no, this is the way kids are being taught in school all the way very young. Companies are having, classes on this. The military, is having courses on this, to instruct their new recruits, about this. Every aspect of society, every club, every organization, every business, every charitable group, every education institution, everyone is being, this is being shoved at them, crammed down their throats, repeated and repeated and repeated and repeated and repeated until they agree with it, basically. And it's taken over in a very short time. It's really taken over the whole public society here in the United States, and in certain other places in the world too. So it really is important that you know, that you understand why your friends talk the way they do, why your businesses, your banks, your insurance companies do the things they do, and so on and so forth. It's very important, I think, that we understand this and that we know what's going on, so that we don't just assume it's just some fly-by-night thing, here today, gone tomorrow. I think it's going to be with us for a very, very long time. Eric?
What is the actual theme that they teach?
They teach that very simply, if you are of a non-white, non-Caucasian, if you are of a minority group, either mixed race or, pure race, whatever, Asian, Indian, subcontinent, Native American, Chinese, Asian, any so-called minority group, then you are owed to be not just recompensed, not just treated equally. Now you are owed to be treated better. In order to make amends for past injustice. And if you are not one of those groups, then you are inherently, whether you know it or not, whether you recognize it or not, whether you even act like it or not, you are inherently a racist. Whether you agree with, whether you think so or not, you are, period. If you are of non-minority status, non-minority race or culture, you are, by definition, a racist. You cannot get away from it. It cannot be taken out of you.
Why not white privilege?
Huh?
Why not white privilege?
Well, that too, the same thing.
Yeah, but I don't like the word racist for sure, because everything seems to be racist anymore. And
I'm just saying this is what's taught, Tony. This is what's taught.
Yeah.
You are, and they will say it right to your face, you are a racist. You can complain about it all you want to.
Yeah.
You can object to it all you want to.
Yeah.
You can say, that's not me, I don't do that, I don't treat people that way.
Yeah.
And they will say, you're wrong. You just don't realize.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. If he asks what they're teaching, that's what they're teaching.
In a way, I look at it, we're talking white racist, in my opinion, and I'm privileged to be a white racist as far as I'm concerned. And it's quite often assumed that because you're a white racist, you might have a good education and things like this. And the other people that are of color are not quite often considered educated. Like this, and again, it comes into there where they're talking about judgment, and where our leaders and stuff like this, where we're supposed to honor and love them and stuff like this, so we're not supposed to necessarily judge them. And it says, why not, if you've got a complaint about them, write to them. Don't go saying a whole bunch of baloney. Yeah. But the hard part is, because I've tried to write to my representatives, they don't read it. No. they get too many, I don't know, maybe they get thousands of letters or whatever, complaints or whatever.
But again, if you write, this is the point. And again, I don't know if I'm making myself clear. This is the exact point. If you turn this back on them and you say, well, elevating, let's say, let's just pick let's say Hispanics. Elevating Hispanics and giving them preferential treatment, and really punishing Caucasians or whites in order to give them this beneficial treatment, that in itself is racism. They will say, yeah, so what? You see, you don't get it. All right? They are allowed to practice racism because this is the only way, according to them, that the wrongs of the past can be corrected. The only way to remove racism from your brain and your personality is to put you in their shoes for the last 500 years. And so it may take 500 years or 1,000 years of putting the non-white races on top and giving them preferential treatment and allowing them to get away with whatever, okay? That may take that, but eventually, the thought is, eventually, if you turn everything around, if you put them on top, and you inculcate that in society, all societies worldwide, for 1,000 years, then things will come to a balance. See, because the white races are on top for 1,000 years, let's say, and these were slaves down here. Now, if you turn it around and put the slaves on top and the whites down here, then after 1,000 years, then finally everything will balance out.
But that's the idea. But they become racist, by...
That's okay for them. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah.
That is acceptable.
Yeah.
Except for one group, the Jews. That's not acceptable for them. And there's all kinds of contradictory things about that, but I won't get into that right now. Yes, Betsy?
Where is the science in this critical race theory? Because I don't see the data backing it up.
It's really a philosophy, and philosophy is not based on science. It's just based on, for X number of years, this group was enslaved. And so they need to be not just equal, but they need to be the masters for X number of years. And so I guess if you want to look for science, they would say, well, you need to balance everything out. And the only way to balance that out is to, as I said in the newsletter, 2 wrongs correct a wrong. That's the idea.
That's the idea, but in reality, that doesn't happen.
No, it doesn't happen. Never has happened. That's never been able to be accomplished. But it's just like socialism. It's never worked wherever it's been tried, but people continue to say, well, we need to try it here or there or wherever, because eventually it'll work if you keep trying it enough. If you keep fixing it enough, eventually you'll find a case where it'll work. Okay, maybe, but see, that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's all about their definition of justice. Their definition of justice is not just an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, but 2 eyes for an eye and 2 teeth for a tooth. Exactly, and it doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter that. Also, by the way, it doesn't matter if your white group, let's say Irish, for example, were enslaved for hundreds of years by the English, or by working slave wages here in the United States, and prejudiced and put in ghettos, and so on and so forth. It doesn't count. That doesn't count, okay? Because they were able to pull themselves up, and now they're considered equal, okay? The same is true of any other group. You can go back in history, and if your family still exists, in other words, your line by the fact you being here, your line survived, okay? Obviously, otherwise you wouldn't be, okay? Your ancestor did not die in the Battle of Hastings in 1066. Your ancestor did not die in the Crusades. Otherwise, you wouldn't be. Okay? So, if you go back far enough, you will find every single one of you probably came from the group of serfs who were slaves. Right? In every kingdom in Europe and beyond, that for 1,000 years, from the fall of the Roman Empire until the Reformation, barely, for 1,000 years, that's how everybody lived. And 0.1% lived in the castles, and the 99.5% lived as serfs, as peasants, who were enslaved, basically, to the landlord. And so, if you want to talk about reparations, for example, let's talk about reparations. Let's talk about paying back all of those, find the families who came over here on ships from Africa who were captured, by the way, by Arabs, not by white people. But anyway, captured by Arabs or sold by their own race into slavery, but be that as it may. Brought over here as slaves, trace their lineage, okay, every single one of them, and if they, say, 5 generations lived on a plantation in Georgia, you work that out by whatever the going wage is, and what they should have been paid, and there's one reparation idea, and you give them that money, okay? How many other generations ago that was. You find that out, and you give them that money. Well, then, if I were you, I would simply say, well, the King of France enslaved my ancestor 1,000 years ago for 5 generations, and so I deserve reparations too. Or my great grandmother worked in a sweatshop in New York, in the Bronx, in a sewing factory for pennies a day. Okay, when she was 13, and let's say her sister, my great aunt, died in a huge fire because he didn't have correct exits and all that kind of stuff, and jumped out a window from the 4th floor and died. And so I deserve, and all the money she could have made in her life, my family deserves that money. So, once we go down the road of reparations for wrongs done to our ancestors, there's no end to it. It would never end, Ancestor was enslaved by the king of Babylonia, right? I mean, really, where are we going to draw the line? Are we going to draw the line? Well, why should we draw the line at 1776? Or why should we draw the line at 1865? Or why should we draw the line anywhere for that matter? Who's to say what's fair and what's equitable and what's just? And then you would ask the question then, of course, well, how come it was that the Italians, who were prejudiced against and treated terribly, and the Irish, who were prejudiced against, and the Spanish, who are often called Caucasians, who were prejudiced against when they came to this country? I'm talking Spain, Mexico. And now, and it didn't take them but 3 or 4 generations to completely meld into society and become very successful. Are you saying that that's not possible for Hispanic, Mexicans or blacks? Are you saying they're not capable of equalizing things? Are you saying there's some kind of genetic fault in them that keeps them from being down? And why is it that 96% or whatever the figure is, 80-something% of the people in jail are African American? And how come most of the murders committed among blacks are committed by blacks? What? Are you saying that there is a racial element in that? Oh my goodness, that can't be, right? So once you start down this road, once you get going on this, not only is it unbiblical, not only is it unchristian, is it anti-science, frankly, but it gets to the point where it is counterproductive and contradictory. And once you go down that road, you open up a Pandora's box of problems. These people have no clue, I don't think, what they're going to run into if they keep going down this road. That's why I say what's going to come next will be worse.
Now, right along that line, I'm wondering if that's not what they're allowing them to do in Seattle, where they, logged off or, and then said, okay, you want socialism? Go ahead, try it. And let it run amok, and let them find out for themselves. That what happens is we actually revert back to what we had in the first place. We need police, we need firemen, we need all these hospitalization.
I think too in Portland, that is exactly what's going on. And I think that what they're finding is like they found everywhere else, that what it has turned into in Seattle and Portland is that a minority of people have elected themselves or appointed themselves as the bosses over, because they decided after a while that anarchy just doesn't work. It doesn't work. You've got to have a power structure somewhere. Right. Sometimes somebody's got to be in charge. That's right. And so this is what happens. And so exactly what happened in Russia and exactly what happened in China and anywhere else, you can say, oh yes, this is a socialist state, but eventually a small group of people rise to the top and impose their will. And that's the only way the system has ever worked, anyway. Yeah. And I don't know, and many of you probably remember from the 60s, the big idea, a lot of people, what was it, tune in, tone out, tune in, I forget what the rest of it was. But anyway, they went to start communes. There was a big commune in the Imperial Valley. Of course, up in Victorville, an area of Charlie Manson and his bunch. There were communes in Oregon. There was one big one in Oregon. There were communes in New Mexico. There was a big place for them, and in Arizona, a couple of places. Every single one of them failed within a couple of years for the exact same reason. Everything was going to be equal. Everything was going to be shared among everybody. Everybody was going to be the boss. Everything would be decided by a majority vote, and so on and so forth. And within months, of course, it turned into utter and complete chaos. And a strong man arose, like Charlie, and took over and imposed his will upon the group. And then either the group totally broke up, everybody said, well, we can get this at home. Or the group became smaller, down to a gang, basically, and committed crimes and robberies and stuff in order to survive. There are a number of very good books written in the 70s and 80s, and you can look them up. You can just Google it, and you can look them up, and you'll find these books on the commune movement, various aspects of the commune movement, and they will prove this without a shadow of a doubt. Kathy?
That's what you were saying about the critical race theory, where whites have to be suppressed worldwide. Right. China has always suppressed whites. So does that mean that in China the whites get to rise up?
Sure. But of course, that being a communist country, or not even a communist country or socialist country, that being a tyrannical country, a dictatorship, where communication is forbidden, or true communication is forbidden, how are they going to do that?
I understand. I understand. The critical race theory would mean that whites get to be on top of other countries, some countries, and some countries not.
Sure. Again, as I mentioned, you can use Mexico for an example again. The Castilians, that is the ones with very heavy amounts of Spanish blood, have always ruled the country, always, since colonial days. And their independence from Spain didn't accomplish a thing for the peons, the pagans. Not a thing. Every revolution that Mexico has had, the peons, the peasants, stay the same. Nothing ever fixes that, ever. Because the Castilians always are on top. With one exception being Benito Juarez, who was mostly Indian. But he was quickly gotten rid of, and there's never been another one like it ever since. So what you have, let's turn that around, And the Castilians will tell you that would be a disaster. Because there's no more racist country on the face of the earth, perhaps outside Israel, that is more racist than Mexico. And if you want to get ahead, you better have pretty pale skin. You better have blonde hair and blue eyes. Okay, because that's who means you're Castillo. If you look like a mestizo, that is an Aztec Indian or a Yaqui Indian, mixed in with Spanish, you can get anyone. Well, you might be a mayor, you might be a congressperson or something, maybe, whatever. And once in a blue moon, one of them gets elected president or everything, but that doesn't last very long. But it is. You look at the businessmen, you look at the millionaires. There are many millionaires in there. Many millionaires. Okay? And there are many mansions, and there are many people with lots of money, not just the cartels, by the way, not just the cartels, but the business, the computer companies and the utility companies and this and that. And they are all Castillo. And so, you're right. If you suggest this to Hispanics, if you say, well, we'll turn this around, they will tell you, oh, that would never work. Because the mestizos don't have good business sense, or whatever, which is racism, of course. Okay. But, I mentioned one time in the class, this was when I was teaching, I mentioned one time in the class, I just asked the question, when the conquistadors arrived in Central America, Mexico, or when the colonial countries arrived off the shores of Africa, I asked two questions. Number one, why weren't they met with armor and cannon? Were they met with wooden swords? Okay, question one. And question two, when the conquistadors and the conquerors and the colonials got off their boats and went inland, where were the hospitals and universities? I mean, you hear archaeologists talk about great cities in Mesoamerica, cities as large as New York City was at the time. You hear them talk about cities as big as London or Babylon, okay, in Central America or in other places, in Africa, for example. Huge, big, gigantic cities of a million people, okay? And yet, it's interesting to ask the question, what did they lack? They did not lack ball courts, recreational facilities. They did not lack football fields. They did not lack armories. They did not lack astronomy posts. They did not lack, certainly they did not lack sacrificial altars to commit human sacrifice on. Those were not lacking. What they lacked were colleges and universities and hospitals. There were no hospitals. Now think about that for a minute. There were no hospitals. If you look at the great cities of the Middle Ages, look at the city of Paris, for example, or London, and compare it to the Muslim city of Toledo in Spain, or Madrid, or in Morocco. This was also the big difference. Although the University of Paris was started more than 1,000 years ago, University at Oxford and Cambridge, 1,000 years ago. There were no such places in the other worlds, in the second and third worlds, whatever you want to call them. And is it because of race? No, it's not because of race. What's it because of? Christianity. It's because of Christianity. Oh, yeah. That's why the French and the English and the Belgians and the Germans and the Italians and everybody else started hospitals 1,000 years ago. They were charitable hospitals. They were places where the poorest of poor, the serfs and the peasants, could go and get cared for. Socialized medicine was invented by Christians. And this is something, I just simply ask people, what was in Beijing at the same time, 1,000 years ago? Were there any hospitals in Beijing? Not that I know of. I've never read any such thing. Ask yourself the question, what was in Moscow that long ago? What was in Nigeria that long ago? What was in Guatemala that long ago? And it's not because the people in those other countries were white. It had nothing to do with the fact that they were white. It had to do with the fact that they were believers in Jesus Christ. It had to do with the gospel of Jesus Christ melted their hearts and caused them to have compassion for their fellow human beings, and caused them to want to investigate the world and understand the world, and so they started universities. That's the difference, folks. It has nothing to do with race. It has everything to do with the gospel. It has everything to do with religion. And that's why I say you need to understand this, because right now they're not really talking about that too much. But they'll get around to it. They'll get around to it. And if you haven't heard it yet, you will. That, well, it's not just that you white guy, you're a racist. And the reason you're a racist because you are a Christian. And so as much as it is important now to put down the Caucasians and whatever, in order that the other ones might be on top for a while, it will also be very important to put down Christianity. And to see the Bible as a racist book. Because the Bible talks about slaves obeying their masters, doesn't it? Oh, yeah, it does, doesn't it? Huh? Now, they'll pick that out, but of course you and I would say, well, what about those passages where it says there is no Greek, there is no Roman, there is no Jew, there is no Gentile, all are the same in Jesus Christ? Well, that's anti-racist. Oh, no. See, because then you're saying Christians are better than everybody else. Well, it's not that Christians are better than everybody else. It says we're going to heaven and the rest of you are going to hell. And that's not a racist comment or an angry comment even. It's just a statement of fact. That's all. To us. Oh, obviously, otherwise we would say it.
Yeah, but every other religion is powerful, think that they're better than everyone else. So
No, as a matter of fact, they don't. No, they don't.
what religion doesn't think that they're
Buddhists and Hindus, the Confucianists, the Taoists, all of those religions figures everybody's going to get to God eventually. Everybody's going to get there. There's even some Muslim scholars that might say that. Not the majority, certainly, but there's some. It's right now, it's a battle between the Islam and Christianity as far as that goes. The majority of Muslim clerics will say only Muslims get paradise, and of course, a tiny minority of Christian theologians still would say that only believers in Jesus go to heaven. The fact of the matter is, the majority of Christian theologians today would be along with the Muslim, with the Hindus and the Buddhists. Oh yeah, everybody's going to get there. That's what Pope Francis says. And if Pope Francis says it, it must be true. Everybody's going to get to heaven eventually, one way or another. Doesn't matter what they do. So, huh?
I might get to the gate, I'm not so sure.
No, everybody gets in. Everybody gets in. Everybody gets in. Hell is there. Hell exists, Francis says, but it's just there because God had an extra something to do on the sixth day and decided to walk in hell. Just to kind of scare them a little bit. But nobody's going to be in there. That's according to the Well, I don't know if Francis is even 100% sure about that. I don't think, when he says empty, I think he means empty. I don't know. Maybe it'll be a place to go on vacation. Get tired of heaven, maybe, hey, can I take the tram to hell just to warm up a bit? That'll be Betsy's request. I'm cold. Is there someplace with a furnace I can go, please? I don't want to stay. I just want to warm my feet. Okay, we need to move on.
There's one thing that always amazes me when non-believers say, no, who can believe in anything? Great, I don't believe that. You tell them they're going to help, they get angry. Why?
Well, because you're saying something negative about it.
They just don't want to believe it.
All right, let us see if we can make some more progress on the Romans. So Romanism, we're going on, we're looking at the 7 sacraments of the Roman Church. According to the Roman Church, confirmation, sometimes referred to as chrismation, right, is one of the 7 sacraments instituted by Christ for the conferral of sanctifying grace and the strengthening of the union between individual souls and God. So they see confirmation or chrismation as something that is an integral part of your relationship with God, not as something that's just for the church, right? So I understand that. Excerpts of the Catechism of the Catholic Church, paragraph 1302. It is evident from this celebration that the effect of the sacrament of confirmation is the special outpouring of the Holy Spirit as once granted to the apostles on the day of Pentecost. So to the Roman, every confirmation is a reenactment, in a way, of Pentecost. From this fact, confirmation brings an increase in deepening of baptismal grace. It roots us more deeply in the divine filiation, that's brotherhood, which makes us cry, Abba, Father. It unites us more firmly to Christ. It increases the gifts of the Holy Spirit in us. It renders our bond with the church more perfect. It gives us a special strength of the Holy Spirit to spread and defend the faith by word and action as true witnesses of Christ, to confess the name of Christ boldly and never to be ashamed of the cross. So that's a lot of stuff. In the Roman Church, confirmation is always, or since it really began being practiced in the Middle Ages, then a big deal. It went from 0 to 60 in 5 seconds. Okay? In other words, it went from nothing, from nothing happening, to being essential, almost overnight. I mean, within the space of 100 years, which, historically speaking, is pretty quick. Okay? Why did this happen? Well, I think the reason it happened is real simple. The reason it happened is that it used to be the first 500 years of Christianity. It was 350, 400 years. That's it. The first 400 years of Christianity, most of the people who came into the church, the organization, the visible church, came in as adult baptized people. In other words, you were already a teenager, you were already middle-aged, you were already whatever, and you were converted, and you went through the catechumenate, which is, catechism simply means a question-answer kind of thing. And so you went through the instruction, question-answer instruction with a presbyter, pastor, and so on. And then you were, usually that took from, when Lent used to be 9 weeks instead of 7, it took that period of time, 3 months, let's say, 2.5, 3 months. And then everybody was brought into the church on the vigil of Easter or the vigil of resurrection on that Saturday night. And then right after midnight, you were baptized into the church. And that continued for many hundreds of years. That was the norm. Well, pretty soon, of course, these people who were brought into the church as especially teenagers and such, and 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds, started having babies. And, of course, the church baptized them right away. The Baptist church does not recognize this or does not make a big deal about it, but I think it's important to note that right away at the beginning of the church, when infants were brought into the church, they were baptized. There was just no question about it. Every historical source says the exact same thing, that infants were baptized and they were considered to be believers. No question about it, right? Well, if you're a believer already at baptism, at 5 days old, 10 days old, whatever, then what? Well, again, the church communed infants for 1,000 years without any question. Nobody. The only question that ever came up was sometimes the little babies, as you know, when you feed the split peas, to the babies, and they put it right back out again. Okay. So the only question was, isn't this bad for the host, the body and blood of Jesus, to have it dribble out on the floor or whatever? And this bothered some people. But that was only done, that was really the only question. Really, that was the only question. The question was not whether they should receive the supper. That was not the question. Or whether they can receive the supper beneficially. That was not the question. The question was the practical part. Now, how do we do this and not dishonor the body and blood of Jesus? Okay, maybe they were a little bit too picky about that, but at least their hearts were in the right place, okay? So they in 1215, they said, okay, let's back off from this a little bit, and let's make sure that people are ready for this in an intellectual way. Now, what's 1215? Well, 1215, you're starting the Renaissance. You're coming out of that time now. You're starting to discover Greek and Latin fathers, the pagan fathers, Aristotle, Socrates, Plato, some who talk about the intellect, they talk about the mind and the spirit, and all this kind of stuff. And so there's a lot of philosophizing going on in the 1200s. And people are starting to think, frankly, a little bit too much. But anyway, they're starting to think. And so they're maybe it's a good idea to hear for ourselves that these children you do recognize how special this bread and wine is and how much they need it. Okay, maybe that would be a good thing. Maybe that would help our church. And so they came up with a couple of rules. First, they came up with a rule that of the age of discretion. This was invented by the guys right prior to the Fourth Lateran Council in 1215. Lateran simply means it's a place in Rome, it's in Rome. And the Fourth Lateran Council in 1215 met, and right before they met, they had a lot of studies going on. Anyway, when they got together, they said, well, let's have an age of discretion, okay? An age of accountability. In other words, before that age, we're not going to hold the individual responsible. But after that age, we are going to hold that individual responsible for their wrongs that they do, and to learn certain things. And so they decided the age of discretion would be left up to the local pastor of the parish. Most of the pastors of the parish, most of the educated people in the parish at the time, decided that 6 or 7 years old was a good time. Before that, they said, they're just little kids, But after 6 or 7, it's, okay, which if you're curious, this kind of led to first grade, 6 years old, and, so a lot of this stuff took a long time to develop. But once it developed, it got ensconced in our society, and it's just probably there now, to this day, of course. But anyway, that was the first thing they came up with. We're going to hold them responsible after 6 or 7. The second thing they came up with is we're going to have them learn how to do confession, or the Sacrament of Penance. We're going to teach them how to do that, right? And we're going to make a rule that you must go to confession at least 4 times a year. And this wound up to be 4 special occasions, like Easter, Christmas. I'm not sure if the same 4 were in every country or not, but it was Christmas and Easter. There were 2 more. Some, I think, were Ash Wednesday, and it may be a favorite saint day in that area. It could be. But anyway, be that as it may, 4 times a year. Which, by the way, when they asked Luther, centuries later, they asked Luther, hey, Luther, how many times should a person go to Lord's Supper? He also said 4 times a year. That's why he said it, because he knew that's what he was doing. Okay? All right, so those are the 2 things that happen. Okay, go to confession, or you must go to confession before you go to the Lord's Supper, and age of discretion. We're going to teach that stuff to people who are over the age of discretion. Now, this age of discretion stuff is totally non-biblical. There is nothing at all in the Bible about such a thing as age of discretion, even though we Lutherans practice it. It's another one of those strange, odd little quirks of history that in the Reformation time, when we're fixing all kinds of other Roman problems, one of the things that we didn't bother to talk about much or fix or do anything with was this age of discretion nonsense. We just kind of left it alone. And I always tell people the reason Luther and his fellows did that is because they had other fish to fry. And they didn't get on with it. Okay? Anyway, okay, be that as it may. That's what happened. And so all of a sudden now, you needed some way to recognize that these kids were ready to take the next step. And so First Communion was created. Okay? And while it's not a sacrament in a sense, because it's just it's communion, it's the Eucharist, but First Communion became separated from the regular communion because First Communion became an occasion in and of itself. Okay? Well, but that wasn't always just really good either, because really you're focusing on one thing or two. You're focusing, if you go to St. Andrews and you ask the head of parish education, what do you do to prepare kids for communion? They will tell you, we focus on teaching them how to confess their sins and how to receive the sacrament. That's all, nothing else. Well, then what about the other things? The things that are important to share the faith? Don't they need to know about Jesus and the Trinity? Don't they need to know about other doctrines like baptism? And don't they need to know and be trained about marriage, for example? It's a sacrament, as we'll see, and so on and so forth. Well, yeah, but we really don't want to muck up that preparation for First Communion with a whole bunch of other stuff. Because that'll just confuse the little words, They're of the age of accountability, but they ain't little Einstein. And so let's keep them, let's just keep things down to the bare minimum. Okay? So then after that, then you hit the other stuff. And you start talking about the history of the church and, who the Pope is and, all that kind of stuff. And you start talking about all the other accoutrements of the Roman Church. And then when you covered the bases with that, then you confirm. And so First Communion usually takes place 6 or 7 years old, maybe as late as 8, especially if the bishop can't get there. It's a rural place. And then the confirmation takes place, 10, 11, maybe 12. Again, the bishop has to be there, so you have to coordinate it, especially if you're in Yuma, the bishop's coming from Tucson, you got to get with the bishop's secretary, when can he make it? In my wife's case, she had both at the same time. This was very common, especially in Yuma and outlying places. She was about 8 by the time that she got First Communion, and then confirmation right after. The service, she says, was about 2 hours, 2.5 hours. They had to go through 4 things. And this was good for the parents in these places, usually poor farming communities like ours was in Yuma, or military communities. And so you only had to buy one dress, and you only had to buy, one hat, and one veil, all this kind of stuff. And then you got the bread, and no wine, of course, but you got the bread and the oil smeared on your head. And I've got pictures of your wife's confirmation with the oil smeared on your head. So then, of course, your sponsors, for whom in the old days you were named, your middle name usually came from a sponsor or from the saint of that day. So my wife was born on St. Teresa's Day, so her birth certificate didn't have a middle name. But when she was baptized, then she was given her baptized name, which was Teresa. So if she would have gone into a convent, she would have been Sister Teresa, not Sister Catherine. Yeah. So that's, in case you're interested, that's where that stuff comes from. Although sometimes the Mother Superior will just give you a name. And so sometimes when you see a nun and you say, what's your name, sister? I'm Sister Ralph. They do that. They do that sometimes. They'll pick a saint, St. John, St. Francis, or St. Joseph, or St. George, or something like that, and you happen to take your nun vows that day on St. George's Day, and they'll just name you St. George. Or just name you Sister George. So, I've met numerous sisters with names like that. All right, let's go on. So a lot of things to count for. 56. In the Roman Church, a sacrament is conferred upon the faithful at about the age of discretion. There it is. Generally about 7. Again, sometimes earlier, sometimes later, depends on the parish priest. Unless the Episcopal Conference has decided on a different age, and that can happen. Sometimes in a year, the Episcopal Conference, or that is the Conference of Bishops in the United States, for example, can say, for this reason, we are declaring, let's say for the pandemic, just for fun, just for argument's sake, for the pandemic, we are declaring 8. We're giving everybody an extra year. They could do that. There is a danger of death or the judgment of the minister or grave reasons suggest otherwise. And those you can look, if you look up the canon of canon law, you can see that. Paragraph 57. Administration of the sacrament is reserved only to a bishop. So the parish priest cannot do this. This must be done only by a bishop. And again, if you're not in a major city where the bishop resides, like Phoenix or Tucson, you gotta wait until the bishop can get around to get there. So the bishop comes down to Sierra Vista once a year, usually, to take care of confirmation. Which means that large groups of older children and young adults also can always confer together, making the occasion something of a rite of passage, an opportunity to profess a personal commitment to the faith. So by the time the bishop gets there, a lot of times these are preteens, and sometimes they can give a confession. Depends again on the parish priest. However, the Catechism of the Catholic Church states, or warns, although confirmation is sometimes called the sacrament of Christian maturity, we must not confuse adult faith with the adult age of natural growth, nor forget that the baptismal grace is a grace of free, unmerited election and does not need ratification to become effective. Wow! I wish this statement was put in the Book of Concord, because Lutherans are messed up on this, big time. You can ask a lot of Lutheran pastors, especially old-timers, and they will say, with straight face, they will say, confirmation is the ratification of baptism. Nothing could be further from the truth. That is rank heresy. And yet I have heard it with my own ears in pastors' conferences all around the city. A lot of pastors teach it this way. You are not a real Christian. You're not a real Lutheran until you become born. Well, what happens to your baptism faith? What is that? Chopped liver? And if you gave them truth serum, they would say, yep, it sure is.
What do they do with the baptism though? Now say, but
Oh, that gives you just enough to get across the line, in case you die or something. By the skin of your chinny chin chin. Yeah. Oh, man, I love my pastor greatly. Boy, that Missouri Synod guy was a great fellow. But I'm telling you, he was so messed up on this. And when I found out the truth, man, was I whoa! And ever since I found it out, which it wasn't until college, when I found it out and I brought it up in seminary many times, the professors all agreed with me. But they also agreed that the common practice, the common thinking out there in the trenches, among the parish pastors, was just that. That's when you graduated. Okay? You're as a baptized member, okay, fine. But as a community, now you're a real Lutheran. Now you're a real Christian. This idea, the Romans are wrong about so many things, but boy, this one they got nailed right on the spot. Even a blind squirrel finds a nut now and then. So So yeah, when you hear that, when you go to your grandson's or granddaughter's confirmation and you hear that preached or said, or overhear somebody, please do me a big favor and knock them down. Don't knock any teeth out, but, just tell them they're wrong. If you've got a problem with it, tell them to call me. I'll fix it real quick. 58. In the early 20th century, Pope Pius X encouraged the admission of children to the reception of the Eucharist as soon as they reach the age of reason, which, by the way, is the same thing as the age of discretion. In contrast to the later age at which they had been admitted for some centuries. Since the age for confirmation remained as before, those being confirmed generally received Eucharist several years earlier. However, the three sacraments of Christian initiation, which are baptism, confirmation, and Eucharist, are increasingly conferred within the Latin Rite Catholic Church in the traditional order, which is obligatory when an adult is baptized. In other words, all three are done when you're baptized as an adult. Which, again, in the Lutheran Church is kind of weird because while we say that baptismal faith is exactly the same as any other faith, right? I mean, is baptizing faith saving faith? Yeah, all right. What does saving faith consist of? Remember, we've done this many times. We've made many lists, haven't we? And what is included on the list? Things like the Trinity, right? The two natures of Christ, right? The reconciliating atonement, that is the atonement, vicarious atonement of Jesus Christ for the sins of the world, by grace through faith, right? That's all there, right? I mean, there are tons of stuff. Who can explain for me perfectly the Trinity, please? No hands? What do you mean no hands? Here, you got it over here. That's the Asian Creed, huh? Perfectly, absolutely perfectly, right? Right? Is it completely understood by everybody? Of course not. Of course not. All right? Does the 2-day-old who's baptized have a true and saving faith in the Holy Trinity? You bet it does. Right? Does it understand the two natures? Well, not understand, but does it believe in the two natures? Yes. Does it believe in the real presence? Sure. These are all essentials of saving faith, we have said numerous times. Huh? And so the faith in which the child is received in baptism is that faith that you have right now. Well, however old you are. Okay? So the Lutheran Church, the Book of Concord, actually teaches that. True enough. Right? That's true. And you can look it up. You can find it. Find it in places. And yet, what do we say? Oh, by the way, if baptism actually creates this faith, right? Instantaneously, right? Right, okay. So, what do we say though? Oh, but an adult must be instructed before he's baptized. Now, those two teachings, baptism creates saving faith all by itself, without any works on our part, without any teaching, without any instruction, without anything. Because it does for a 2-year-old, or a 1-year-old, or a 2-week-old, it does for a 50-year-old, right? Correct? That's correct biblical teaching, isn't it? Okay. And then we turn right around, and all of a sudden we get real nervous about sprinkling water on somebody without first making sure they know what's going on. Well, then why don't we question the little 2-day-old? Hey, kid! We don't, do we? Because that would be kind of silly, wouldn't it? So when we can get away with it, we impose question time on people before we baptize them. When we can't get away with it, we don't. Now, is that biblical? No, it's not biblical. It's not confessional either. Yes, ma'am.
The 2-day-old can't resist the faith.
Who says? That's wrong.
Well, the adult
give that lady a rubber chicken.
The adult has life experiences and other
Doesn't matter.
things that have been pounded into
Where does it
him.
say that in the Bible? Doesn't matter. No. The Bible does not make room for human experiences. The Bible says baptism creates faith. Doesn't say what age.
I'm not arguing
Okay, we are conceived in sin. So the rejection is there in the 1-day-old or even the preborn, just as it is the 50-year-old. Correct?
Not arguing the biblical basis, I'm just saying the practicality is that people are worried about.
Well, that's exactly what the Romans do. That's exactly what the knuckleheads in the synods do. Well, we're just being practical. Well, I'm not. This is not a study in practicality. This is a study of what's biblical and what's not. And if we're going to pick on the Romans, like we've been doing, and we will be for a while, if we're going to pick on the Romans, let's also pick on ourselves, huh? Let's also, in the process, while we're pointing out where the Romans are wrong, let's also understand where we're wrong and been wrong for hundreds of years. Your examination Sunday that so many pastors are so proud of is false and wrong. It should never have been started in the first place. It is disgusting. And I hate it. And the pride and the peacocking and the arrogance that people have when they either participated and do so well, much better than the dummy over here, or the pastors who praise around and squawk themselves with their pretty feathers about, boy, I really got them with my instruction and my inquisition questions today. I just want to walk up to them and just smack them right in the nose. It's disgusting. Revolting. What do they think they are? I mean, really, think about it, folks. Think about it. What is this thing about your baptism of faith? This is putting your baptism of faith in the trash can as being worthless and useless. How dare we? But boy, try pointing this out. Man, they'll hand you your head so fast it'll make your head spin. How dare you question tradition? We've been doing that. And when I got to my congregation in Wisconsin, the 100-year-old congregation, very first year I told them there will be no examination. None. Boy, those old farmers went just about ballistic. They called up the district president. Hey, this guy is a weirdo. Get him out of here. And the district president called and I asked him some questions, and he agreed. Yeah, you're right, of course. But come on. That's the tradition among those guys. That's a little rural congregation in the little cornfields of Wisconsin. Cut them some slack. No. When it comes to false doctrine and practice, no. I will not. Fire my butt if you want to, but I will not.
Okay. I was visiting Wisconsin, my brother's church. Exactly what you're explaining happened. Went through both the examination and the confirmation and.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Now look at me. Where's Jesus Christ in that? I ask you. He's down the road somewhere. He's not in that church that day. Huh? Sure it is. And it's illogical in us too. You know, it's the seminary professors, the theologians, and everybody else, who just said, and I'm picking on you, Kathy, I'm just saying, who would say, well, this is reasonable, this is practical, this is logical. Let's do this. Or even worse, well, this is the way it's always been done, so let's just keep doing it. Well, as I said to a pastor in Phoenix one time about some of this stuff, I said, but the way it's been done is wrong. He was mad because some kid showed up from our church here to take communion. And he was, 7 or 8 years old. And boy, did I get a phone call that afternoon. Wow! This guy landed on my town and started to rip me a new one. And I quickly cut him off and I said, excuse me, are you telling me I did something wrong? Well, not exactly. And so I asked him some of these questions that I'm asking you. They're telling you, and you say, well, but that's just not the way we do it in the West. Well, excuse me, you're not telling me that I'm wrong. But I'm telling you, you're wrong. Now, you prove which of us is right or wrong. You never called that. So, again, do we just let this stuff keep going? Do we just let this stuff happen? Because that's the way we've always done it. Okay? We allow these kids, for example, to get into sixth grade or fifth grade or sixth grade or middle school. I mean, where's the temptation today, folks? When you were young, where was the biggest temptation in your educational life? It was high school, probably, wasn't it? It was high school when you got a car, and you got to park in the back row of the drive-in, right? Okay? Well, guess what, folks? Guess what? The temptations and the tribulations that come upon kids today with the social thing and the Instagram and the Facebook and all this kind of stuff, it starts at 6, 7, 8, 9 years old. So what? We're going to make them wait till they're 13 or 14 before we give them the extra strength and power of the Lord's Supper? Now, I ask you, does that make any sense at all? Well, when I ask this pastor, why don't you start it? Why don't you instill it? Why don't you, he has a parochial day school. And I said, you've got the perfect opportunity. You've got the perfect opportunity. You've got parochial day school. You've got a school. You can start this in 2nd or 3rd grade. Oh, my teachers would have checked. Give them another something to teach. In other words, it doesn't matter how right something is. It doesn't matter how correct something is. Oh, it'll take too much work. Then we can't do it. Yeah, let's finish this so we can get out of here.
I have one question.
Yeah.
One comment. The worst terrible, what would it be, anxiety was those 2 years of memorizing in front of Pastor Capsule.
Yeah.
Which,
I know.
it was like, I was just about in shreds.
She's simply confirming what we all know.
Yeah.
Some of our worst experiences in our life was catechism class. Correct? I see a lot of heads going, right? Where's the gospel in that, folks? Where's the love of Jesus in that? Where is the preciousness of God's word in that? Rather than a whip and a club? You better do it or else. You won't get confirmed, and if you won't get confirmed, you won't be driving no car. I mean, folks, if we just let it all out, we'd all have a nice confession session here, right? Let's all just have open confession here. We all confess that our childhoods growing up in the so-called conservative Lutheran church was a bunch of dreck under a dragon's tail, as Luther said. Isn't it? If we really if we really truly honest with ourselves, then why? Where's the love? Where's the kindness of Christ? Where's the beauty of the gospel? Where's the wonderment of the sacraments? Where's the strength and encouragement of those sacraments? Where's all that good stuff that's there? It was just ground out of us. And and then now you wonder, we did the same thing to our kids, okay? And our grandkids, and now we sit back and we wonder, the percentage of attendance of young people, 25 and younger, in the church today is a pittance compared to what it was 50 years ago. When you were 20 or 25, you went to church. Okay? Kids today, 20, 25, they don't go to church. You can't drive to church. You can't put a gun to their head, kid. Even really good kids, I know a number of them, live in Tucson, live in Phoenix, they know where the churches are, I tell them. They go once a year, twice a year maybe. And I asked them, why don't you go to Grace downtown, Tucson? Why don't you go to Emmaus or in Phoenix or Emmanuel in Tempe, right near the university? And why don't you go? It doesn't do a thing for me.
Here's the same thing over and over, that's the letter.
Well, that do, but not even that. Doesn't do a thing for me. Yes, ma'am.
My brother is vice versa, and when he's doing anything, well, I believe in Jesus, I'll do it, and believe it.
Right. Yeah. Why? Because they don't get anything from it. It's as simple as that. They just don't get anything from it. Right? And why don't they get anything from it? Because a lot of it was just drummed out of it. That's a sad truth. So, I mean, we got a lot of work to do, folks. If we want this next generation back in church, we got a lot of work to do. And it better be work of the gospel, not the law. We've got to stop threatening these kids, and we've got to start inviting them to something good. Come and learn about the love of Christ. Come and learn about the forgiveness of Jesus. Come and learn about the comfort of the sacrament. Come and experience that. No, the songs won't be so hot. But the rest of that will be great. Real quick. Let's jump down to paragraph 60 real quick. One of the effects of sacrament is to give us a special strength of the Holy Spirit to spread and defend the faith. In other words, it's the education. It's not really the sacrament itself. It's the education they get. And one thing you've got to give to the Romans, you can take a kid out of the Roman church, but you can never take the Roman church out of the kid. You can trick them 60 years after they left the Roman church, and they'll still recite the rosary, and they'll still recite the liturgy, and they'll still, that's the old joke. You go to a funeral, a Catholic funeral, and if you're a Lutheran or whatever, no matter what, you go to a Catholic funeral, and the priest stands up and says, "The Lord be with you." Everybody says the same thing, and also with you, right? And it doesn't matter if you haven't been to Mass in 50 years. You just automatically respond. Okay? And like I say, give them a lot of credit. They know how to do that without a whip and a chain, by the way. Right? Maybe a ruler once in a while. In this connection, the touch on the cheek that the bishop gave while saying "Peace be with you" to the person he had just confirmed was interpreted as a slap. A reminder of the encouragement to the Roman legionnaire to be brave in spreading and defending the empire. With an application of the Second Vatican's Council Constitution of Sacred Liturgy, the confirmation was revised and in 1971, and mentioned this gesture was omitted. My wife tells me this was a big deal. This was a big deal. With oil, and then whack. Oil, whack. Oil, whack. This is what the Roman legionnaires got. Now let me tell you, the kids, whoo, man, I'm a Roman legionnaire. Ready for the Knights of Columbus! Right? It's too bad it's gone. That was kind of cool. It was a nice historical connection. All right, we got to go. May the grace of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, the love of God the Father, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be abide with us all. Amen.
Thank you.
You want me to keep that? I'm making more. All right. I'm making more. I'll have this way. I'm making more.